Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave from Evil Eye Games. Today I wanted to address in our tutorial something that was brought up to me, and that was the fact that our player can't equip multiple weapons and update the HUD. Now the reason behind this, if we look into our HUD and we look at our gameplay widget that we have here, in the graph we're going ahead and we're binding these events that are updating those elements of the HUD. Now, the problem with this is this binding occurs when the widget is initially created. So if you end up switching your equipped weapon, this event construct that we're using to bind all the weapons isn't getting fired again. And the reason I did it this way is because the binding events to dispatchers is an event-driven system, and it uses less resources. Now, there is a way in the HUD to automatically pull variables from different objects. It's a little bit more expensive cost-wise, but it's relatively low to some of the things that we could do. So today I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to update our characters so that we can equip more than one weapon. And when we equip those weapons, they're going to go ahead and update our gameplay widget HUD. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our main window. We're going to open up our characters folder, and we're going to open up our player characters. And to get easy access to the skeleton, I'm just going to go ahead and open up our 3P player anim BP. And we're going to go to the skeleton tab. And I'm going to create a mounting on the back of the character that we can attach a weapon to. So I'm going to add this at the spine 03 bone. And then that reflection is really annoying. So up at the top here, I'm going to go and set this to unlit mode. So it's not going to show those reflections. And we're going to select the spine 03 bone. And I'm going to right click. And we're going to go ahead and add a socket. And I'm going to call this the back weapon socket. And we're going to right click. And we're going to add a preview asset. And I'm going to add the shotgun. So we'll select the shotgun. And in order to manipulate this socket, we're going to have to play some sort of animation. So at the top here, we have the AMCC. That'll work plenty for us. So we're going to go ahead and manipulate this socket so that our asset that we see looks like it's sitting on our character's back. So right about there looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to save, and we have to save the skeleton too. So if you click on the skeleton tab and hit the save button, that's going to save our socket. And we can go ahead and close out of our anim BP. Next, we're going to go to our main window, and we're going to go ahead and open up our player character. And if we go up to the top where we begin play, I have it set up where I collapse the graph down to where we set up the weapon. And I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this. And we're going to grab all this and drag it all off to the side for now. And we're going to start out with a sequence. And we're going to break down what we're going to do step by step with these sequence nodes. So the first thing that we do is we end up spawning our assault rifle. And then we cast it and set it to our equipped weapon. We then attach it to our mesh in the weapon socket. And then we go ahead and set the reference to the camera. And I'll break this link to the output too, because we're going to do that separately. Now, we're spawning our assault rifle here, but we need to spawn something like a shotgun. So we're going to have to create another child weapon. So in our weapons folder, in our player weapons here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click on our base weapon and create a child blueprint. And we're going to call it shotgun _ BP. And we're going to go ahead and open up our shotgun, and I'm going to just change the mesh on this. So we're going to select the shotgun, and we'll set that as the mesh. And we'll compile and save it. And I'm not going to really go through setting up the shotgun right now. I just want something that looks different so that we know we're switching weapons. So we can go back into our player character here. And on a side note, one thing I did figure out was when we were in our projectiles, we were having an issue where sometimes you had to cast to the spawned actor, sometimes you didn't. And the reason I found is if you use the class as a variable here, it will not auto cast the actor it's spawning. So if I ended up breaking this link to this weapon to spawn, you'll notice that the title changes from just spawn actor to spawn actor base weapon blueprint. And if I hit compile, it's going to throw up a error message right here where we're casting to it, because now that this is set as an option, it's automatically casting to our base weapon. So we can actually go ahead and get rid of this base weapon blueprint. And we're not going to use this variable anymore because it's highly useful for this to auto cast. Now that depends on your situation. If you have like a set of variables that can affect it, you might want to use the class, and in that case you're going to have to cast. So from our then pin, we're going to hook up into our spawn actor base weapon, and we're going to change this over to the assault rifle. So this is going to spawn us an assault rifle blueprint. And now that I'm looking at it, it is casting it to the assault rifle blueprint reference. So I'm going to go ahead and promote this to a variable, and we're going to call this assault rifle, just so we can keep track of it. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to cast all of these to a base weapon blueprint. So we're going to go ahead and drag off from our return value, and we're going to cast to our base weapon, BP. And as the base weapon BP, we're going to drag out, and we're going to search for make array. And what this is going to do is it's going to make a list of base weapon items that you can add to and take away from. And it's going to add it into the first slot, which is the 0 slot. And then from our array, we're going to drag out, and we're going to go ahead and promote this to a variable. And we're going to call this weapon inventory. So this array is going to be a listing of all the weapons in our inventory. And you can go ahead and keep adding to this weapon inventory if you want the character to have more weapons. But then what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. So our spawn and our cast, we're going to go ahead and plug this in after we set our weapon inventory. And I'm going to delete this assault rifle variable. And under class here, I'm going to go ahead and search for the shotgun blueprint that we just created. And I'm going to go ahead and promote that to a variable, and I'll just call it the shotgun. So that way we know we're doing the same thing. We have a reference to the class for the assault rifle, we have a reference to the class for the shotgun, and then we're casting. And then we will already have this array set up, so we want to go ahead and add to it. So I'm going to drag out a reference to our weapon inventory, and we're going to drag out and search for add. And under array, we're going to have add. We're going to plug this in after we cast to our weapon, and we're going to grab the cast and plug it into our add. So it's taking this existing array, and we're just adding that onto what was already in the array. So now we have our weapons spawned, and they're added to our weapon inventory. The next thing we need to do is we need to attach them to our character and go ahead and set one to be our equipped weapon. So we're going to drag out from our then one pin, and we're going to go plug it into our equipped weapon. And then we're going to grab our weapon inventory reference here, and we're going to get our reference, and we're going to search for get. And that's going to return this get, and we're going to plug that into our equipped weapon. Now, one thing to keep in mind when dealing with arrays is the first item in a list is going to be 0. So right now, we're grabbing item 0, which is our first item, and we're going to automatically set that to our equipped weapon. And then we'll do what we did before, where we attached an actor to the component. And then we're going to go ahead and set the camera. We just have to make sure to hook the reference of our equipped weapon up to our set camera. And then we'll drag it off a little bit more to the side here. And then we're going to have to go ahead as well and get the second item in our list. So I'm going to drag off from our weapons inventory again. And we're going to type get. And this time we want to get the integer for the second item in our list, which is going to be 1. And now that we have a reference to this, we want to do the same thing where we attach an actor to a component. And we also want to go ahead and duplicate the set camera. And the target for our attach actor to component is going to be the result of this get. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. And then for in parent, we want to get a reference to the mesh again here. And for the socket name, we want to attach this second weapon to our back weapon socket. So we'll update the socket name. Keeping in mind, the socket names have to be absolutely identical. So if it doesn't attach to the socket, this is going to be the first thing you're going to want to check. And then we're also going to have to attach our get to the set camera. All right, so for our then one spot here, we are going to go ahead, we grab our weapon inventory, we get the first index, which is index 0. We set that as our equipped weapon. We're going to go ahead and attach it to our weapon socket. We then set the camera on that equipped weapon. Then we get our second item in our array here, which is index number 1. We go ahead and attach that component to our mesh in our back weapon socket, and then we go ahead and we set the camera on that as well. We're going to go ahead and add a third pin here, and we're going to connect this then to our execution out. Now if we go ahead and compile and save, if we hit play, we're going to see that there is a shotgun attached to the back of our character. Now we have to create a system so we can switch between the two. And one thing we're going to actually want to do before we finish up with our setup weapons here is we're going to want to get a reference to what index of the weapon inventory we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another pin. And I'm going to break this link to the output. And we're going to want to create a new variable. And I'm going to call this the weapon index. And it's going to be of a type integer. And from our then to pin, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set this weapon integer. And we want it set to 0 because the first weapon in our inventory here is index 0, and that's what we're setting to our equipped weapon. And then we're going to go ahead and plug our then 3 pin to our output. So we're going to go ahead and compile and save. And then we're going to go ahead and create a new function. And I'm going to call this function switch weapons. Now we're going to want to go ahead and get our weapon index here. And we're going to go ahead and add +1 to that weapon index. And we want to compare this against how many items are in the weapon inventory here. So if we grab a reference to our weapon inventory, we're going to drag off of that and we're going to get the length. And this is going to return how many items are in our weapon inventory. But we want to compare this number relative to the indexing within the array. So we're going to drag off of this and we're going to subtract 1. Reason standing is, if we remember in the array, items are 0 and 1. if we go ahead and get the length, it's going to return a number of 2. So what we're going to end up doing is we want to check to see if our weapon index plus 1 is greater than the length of our inventory. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a branch, and we're going to connect this branch up to our switch weapon execution pin, and we'll connect our check into our condition. Now, if our weapon index here is greater than the length, I want it to cycle back around. So this is going to be really easy. We're going to go ahead and we're going to set our weapon index to 0. And if it's false, we're going to go ahead and we're going to duplicate this set weapon index, and we're going to set it to this number following the addition. Now we have our weapon number index set. We are going to go ahead and actually perform the swap on the weapons. So from our switch weapon here, I'm actually going to go ahead and put in a sequence. And then from our then 1 pin here, what we're going to do is we're going to have to go ahead and grab each weapon and move them to different sockets. So next we want to go ahead and attach our weapons to the appropriate sockets. So we're going to right click and we're going to search for attach actor to component. And this is the same thing we did when we initially spawned the weapons. So we want to attach our weapon here. So we're going to grab our equipped weapon and we're going to plug that into the target. The in parent is going to be a reference to our mesh. And in the socket name, right now we have the equipped weapon, so we want to attach it to our back weapon socket. And we're going to go ahead and snap to target, keep world scale, and weld simulated bodies. So this is going to go ahead and get our equipped weapon, and it's going to attach it to our back. Next, we're going to go ahead and get our weapon inventory. And we're going to go ahead and get, and we're going to go ahead and plug our weapon index into the index number. And once again, we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to duplicate this, attach actor to component. Now the actor we want to attach is the result from what we're getting from our weapon inventory here. And then, of course, the mesh is going to be the same for the parent. And for this one, we want to plug it into the weapon socket. So we want to take it out from our inventory, and we want to put it into our weapon socket. And once again, we want to snap to target, keep world scale, and then weld simulated bodies. And then finally, we want to go ahead and set the new equipped weapon. So we're going to go ahead and drag out our equipped weapon, and we're going to set it. And we're going to set it to the return result from this get. Now, if you're using more than 2 weapons, you're probably not going to be able to attach all the weapons on his back to the same socket. So you might have to, instead of just attaching actor to component, just setting it to hidden. But for our case right now, we want to attach it to the back so we can actually see this in action. So we're going to go ahead and hit compile and save. And now we actually need an input to go ahead and perform this switch weapons function. So we're going to go to Edit, Project Settings, and we're going to go to our Input, and we're going to add a new action mapping. We're going to call this action mapping Switch Weapons Button, or Switch Weapon Button. So we can go ahead and close our project settings, and then we're going to have to open up our player character controller. So I'm going to scroll down to an empty area here. We're going to right click and we're going to search for the switch weapon button. And I don't think I actually, I think I forgot to actually map a key to that. So for input, I didn't put a button in here. So we're going to have to set this. I'm going to set it to the mouse wheel up. And I'm going to add a second one, and we're going to do the mouse wheel down. We only have 2 weapons, so it's only going to swap back and forth between them for now. But you can create a custom event where one increments upward, one increments downward through the inventory. So we'll close out our project settings, and we'll go back into our controller. So when we hit the button, we're going to go ahead and get our player character. And we're going to go ahead and call that Switch Weapons. And we're going to go ahead and plug that in. And we'll compile and save. And if we hit play, if we go ahead and hit the mouse wheel, we'll see that the weapons swap between each other. And they fire differently because we haven't configured the shotgun yet, so it's just using single fire. But you'll notice that it's not updating the HUD. If I switch back to our assault rifle, it's going to go ahead and update the HUD. And when I switch weapons back, it'll stop updating the HUD. So now let's get into fixing our HUD. So if we go into our gameplay widget again, we're binding the weapon overheat percent and the weapon overheat text to the weapon. We're not going to need to do that anymore. So we're going to go ahead and delete these bindings up here and our reference to our equipped weapon. And I'm just going to plug this back in over here. So we need to replace these bindings with something. So what we're going to do is, if you go into the designer here and you click on the bar, next to where the percent is, you can click on bind, and you can create a new binding, and it's going to create this function up here. And I'm just going to rename this because I don't like the naming convention that it automatically uses. So I'll just call it get weapon overheat bar percent. And what this is going to do is it's going to constantly check something, and we're going to plug in a return value here for the percent of the overheat bar. So in order to take care of that, we're going to go back to our weapons, and we're going to open up our base weapon blueprint. So at the bottom here, where we have the update heat, we go ahead and we call this overheat percent dispatcher. So we're going to replace this with something. I'm going to delete this call. And what we're going to do is, from our result of our division here, I'm going to go ahead and actually promote this to a variable. And I'm going to call this heat displayed. And this is the variable that we're going to go ahead and monitor instead of calling on our weapon dispatcher. So we can go ahead and compile and save. And if we go back to our widget here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get... Actually, do we have a reference to our player character in here? It doesn't look like it. So from our event construct here, I'm going to go ahead and promote this to a variable, and we're going to call it player character. And we're just going to plug this in line over here after we cast. We're going to plug that in and compile and save. And then in our weapon here, I'm going to go ahead and right click and, well, we can actually just drag this reference out here. So we're going to get our player character, and then we're going to go ahead and get the equipped weapon. And then from our equipped weapon here, we're going to go ahead and get displayed health, or I'm sorry, get heat displayed. And then we're going to go ahead and simply plug this value into our return value. And it's really that simple. And so we're going to go ahead and compile and save, and we hit play to test this. If I fire the assault rifle, it'll go ahead and assign the heat, but if I switch the weapon, it'll instantaneously empty the bar, and it'll have a new overheat percent here. So if I switch back and forth and I fill up these bars, it's going to update to whatever weapon is in the player character's hand and what's set to that equipped weapon. Now we're going to have to do the same thing with the overheat text as well. So we're going to go back to our designer. We're going to grab the overheat text right there. And then if we go to visibility, we're going to go ahead and bind and create a binding. And I'm going to rename this again because once again I don't like this naming convention. I'm just going to use a simple camel case. So once again, we're going to get our player character. We're going to get our equipped weapon. And then we're going to go ahead and get the weapon overheated variable. And we're going to put in a branch. And plug this in. Now, if our weapon is overheated as true, we want to set this text to visible. And then we're going to duplicate this return node. And if it's false, we are going to set it to hidden. So we're going to go ahead and compile and save. If we test it out and we start firing the weapon, we're going to go ahead and overheat it. And right now the weapon's overheated. If we switch, the text shifts. But you'll notice that the alarm sound is still playing in the background. So we're going to have to take care of that. So we're going to go back into our base weapon blueprint here. If we go up to the top here with our overheat alarm, we're going to want to add an additional check here to see if the weapon, or an additional check when we check to see if the weapon is overheated. So we're going to go ahead and right click and we're going to get our player character. And we're going to need to go ahead and cast this to our 3P player character. And then we're going to have to get the equipped weapon. And we want to check to see if the weapon we're using right now is the same weapon that is equipped. So we're going to search for the equal object. And then we're going to right click and get a reference to our self. And we're going to plug this into the other input on the equals. And then we'll drag this off a little bit more. And we want to actually put in an and here. And we'll plug that into our branch. So this alarm will only play when the weapon is overheated and if we are the equipped weapon. So let's go ahead and compile and save, and we'll hit play. And we'll go ahead and overheat our assault rifle again. So right now it's playing the alarm. If I switch to the other weapon, it stops it. And if I switch back, it starts playing the alarm again. Now the last thing we can go ahead and do, I'm going to go ahead and close this macro, is we can get rid of these dispatchers in our weapons because we're not using them anymore. So when you go ahead and get rid of something like this, a good idea is to right click on the dispatcher or whatever you're trying to delete and click on Find References. And it's going to find everywhere that this is used. Now the first item here is going to be the dispatcher or the variable or whatever you're trying to delete. And then it's going to show where it's called after that. So in the reduce heat buildup function here, we're calling this dispatcher. Now this weapon overheated variable is what's being read, so we can get rid of this dispatcher. In the fire heat buildup here, I don't think we're actually using that anymore. So let's go ahead and open that up. And once again, it's checking to see when we set the weapon to overheated, it's calling this dispatcher. So once again, we can go ahead and delete that. And then in the event graph here, when we reduce heat, when we set the weapon to overheated, we're doing this do once and calling the dispatcher once again. So we can actually get rid of the do once and the dispatcher. And we can just size that down. So if I right click on it again and find references, the only reference that's going to be left is the dispatcher itself. So we can go ahead and safely delete it. And then we're going to do the same thing with our weapon overheat percent dispatcher. And we still have this leftover function here where we reduced heat previously. And that's where this dispatcher call is coming from. So we can actually get rid of this reduce heat buildup because the reducing the heat is occurring in the event graph now, and we're not using this function any longer. So we're going to go ahead and delete that function. And then if we find references to our overheat percent dispatcher, we're going to see that there's nothing left except the reference to itself. So we can go ahead once again and delete that dispatcher. And we can go ahead and compile and save. And we're going to go back to our main window here. And if I hit play, we have it set up so that we have a weapon that's equipped on our back. We have a weapon that's equipped in our hands. And only one of those weapons at a given time is updating our heads-up display. Now, this equipped weapon system, I'm probably not going to include in my game, just because I think that having a weapon that recharges there's not really a huge point in having a secondary weapon for any real reason. I mean, it might be useful to carry something like a shotgun and an assault rifle, but I think what I'm going to do for my game is have the player either select a weapon or a character that has a set weapon when they go ahead and start the game. But this is useful if there are some points in levels where I want to have like a grenade launcher that the player can pick up and have a limited number of shots with. So that's going to complete today's video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below. And thanks for watching.